The algorithm will take a little while to catch up, but welcome everybody. For those of us joining us live, Facebook, Instagram, and I think we're on YouTube as well. Is that right, Nave?
You're on my YouTube, yes.
Amazing. And we're live on Instagram as well. So, um, welcome to the internet, and internet, welcome to me and Nave. Why don't we start with just introducing ourselves a little bit, like for the benefit of my audience who might not know you, Nave, let us know who you are and what you do. And I'll do the same in a moment.
Okay, well, I'm Neve. I call myself a women's confidence coach. Basically, what I do is I help women find their voice. So whether that's in their relationships, in their family, in their workplace, or whether it's in their business, it's helping them to find the confidence to actually speak up for themselves, to say no to the things they don't want, yes to the things they do want. And I've been particularly working with business women recently around imposter syndrome and what I call comparisonitis, that need we have to compare ourselves to everybody else and always come off worse. So that's basically what I do. I use Reiki, guided meditation, and journaling as some of my tools to help women do that.
Nice. And yeah, journaling is one of the things that we'll talk about today, or the thing that we'll be talking about today. But I'd love to touch in on some of the other things that are in our toolkits as well, because as with all tools, quite often they work really well complementing each other, and having a toolbox is often very useful rather than limiting ourselves to just the one thing that will do forever and ever, even when it stops working. So my tangents have begun. So my name is Raphy, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm the founder of Co-Create, where I offer one-to-one coaching and a community membership for artists and creatives. And I work with artists who, when I say artists, I mean like poets, writers, authors, musicians, visual artists, photographers, dancers, choreographers, filmmakers, etc. So if you have a creative passion, then that's who I'm talking to. And I work with people one to one, usually when they have a fairly established career in their creative field, and they've made it, as it were, but they find themselves in a relatively, not relatively, but a very common trap of over focusing on the art that they think would sell versus the art that they actually want to create, the art that's calling to them from their spirit and they want to bring into the material world. And I also have a community membership, which is designed for what I call the everyday artist who, you've got a full-time job and or a business, and you have maybe a family, like four cats, three dogs, two llamas, and a lizard, and you have elderly parents that you're taking care of, and life is super full, and yet inside there's this creative drive that just will never go away because it's an integral part of who you are. And when you're not taking care of that and when you're not nurturing that, it feels really sucky because you're neglecting a big part of your spirit and who you are. And so, and right now I'm actually in the middle of launching a beta program where I help artists and creatives create a personal brand so that they can really do justice to their art when they finally put it out there in the world. Because fundamentally, I believe that artists are leaders in the evolution of consciousness, and when we put our art out in the world, literally the world, the universe shapes itself around that piece of art, and it changes the way that we think, it changes our consciousness, it changes our perception, and it changes the paradigm that we live in. And that's why, people like Da Vinci, people like Charlie Chaplin, people like Madonna, like these are people who have literally changed the course of history, and that's why we remember them. So um that's what I'm on a mission to do. And and so today we're talking about what's journaling got to do with all of that. Well, it's great to talk about these like grand visions, which is like one of my favorite things to do, and really think far into the future and look at the big picture of what we're doing and connecting with that bigger purpose and vision. But what does the everyday look like? What does it mean to show up and be that leader of consciousness? How does it mean? What does it mean to show up and really represent your art and do it justice? And for me, the day to day existence of what I do includes these tools like journaling. For me, it's integral. If I do go a day without it, it's probably not a very good day. Um, but um, yeah, like Nave, tell us a little bit about your experience and your relationship with journaling.
Well, my relationship with journaling started many years ago when I was diagnosed with severe clinical depression and anxiety to the point where I could barely leave the house. And a counsellor I was seeing at the time, who I wouldn't rate for anything else, but she did tell me to journal. She didn't tell me anything else about journaling. She just told me to buy a notebook. So I got a notebook and I sat down and I started writing. And after a while, I realized that I was writing the same thing every day. And basically, what I was writing was a diatribe of self-hatred. It was, oh, I
Mm,
hate myself. I suck. And I was about to fling it out the door the journal, at the door one day. I was in sheer frustration. I'm not doing this anymore. It's not helping. When a prompt came to me, and that prompt was, and it's one I use regularly as well, still to this very day, is what do I need right now? And when I sat down with my journal and I wrote, what do I need right now? What it came up was that I needed to feel safe and secure emotionally. And I thought, well, I realized, at that point I was in an abusive relationship. I wasn't going to be able to feel safe and secure emotionally in that relationship. So the next question that popped into my head was, how can you do that for yourself? And that was
mm,
kind of a game changer, because then I started to realize I could do these things for myself. And every day then when I sat down with my journal, I would get a prompt, and then maybe sometimes 3 or 4 prompts, follow on prompts, questions that were just coming from, I don't know where they were coming from. It sounded like my voice in my head, but they helped me through the depression and the anxiety. They helped me see that, because I had lost all sense of who I was. I'd given myself over to my relationship. I'd tried and tried and tried to change myself to be somebody I was not, just so
mm,
he would love me, but he was never going to
mm,
love me. And
mm,
so I found myself again through that journal. And the other thing that enabled me to do is to start writing poetry again, because I had written poetry from the time I could hold a pen. And
mm,
for the years of my marriage, I stopped.
mm,
And once I started journaling, that seemed to open up some sort of creative outlet as well again. So
mm,
I started writing poetry again. I started writing short stories. I had a blog which actually got so many followers, but I actually shut it down because I got so scared by the number of people who were interacting and liking and saying, "Oh, this is really helping me." And I just thought, no, I can't. At that point, I could not handle that visibility, so
mm.
I shut that blog down. It still exists, but it's hidden away. Um, but yeah, that's what journaling can do for you. Oh, I think it opens up channels to other things
I
because you get
totally
to see
agree.
yourself.
Yes, exactly, and that's what I was going to lead on to, because I think it's interesting you talked about visibility with this blog situation, and clearly the world was ready for you. It was it was just a case of us, the artists, ourselves being ready. Hi, Karen. Um, and
Hey, Karen.
and you know, for me, the process of journaling, as you've said, it's really a way for me to be able to see myself in action, to see not just like my behaviors, but like my thoughts. And it was interesting that, as you were journaling at the beginning, and there was just this, you described it as a diatribe of self-hatred. That was my experience of like maybe like the first few attempts at creating a journaling practice, because there was very much like a stop and start. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. I was very resistant to it. I've gone through training after training in various modalities, and everybody's bloody talking about journaling, and I hate it. At the time, it felt like it was boring. That was the surface reason. Underneath, there was something I was clearly avoiding. But when I did, kind of give myself a chance, it was just this like stream of like actually violence towards myself. And, and so many times I did abandon it, like, just threw it out the window like you wanted to do. And for me, the prompts didn't come for a really, really long time. And what I felt like I actually needed to go through the experience of seeing just how repetitively abusive I was to myself,
Mhm.
and to start seeing it as a pattern, and like start seeing, I was writing the same sentences over and over again, like word per word. And there came a point where you have to see that, like, in literal black and white paper, and then you look at it and you're like, wow, this is a pattern. I'm not just having a bad day.
Yeah.
This is something that keeps going on and on. It doesn't matter, like, and I tried chronicling my day, like what actually happened, and then how I felt. Yeah, there was no correlation. There was just this underlying story that kept going on and on and on, about how awful I was, about how, I didn't really have a right to be here. There's no point of me at all. Whose mistake was I? Like, how did this happen? At some point, someone's gonna find out I'm not supposed to be here, and they're gonna kick me out of the planet. And like, so when you start reading these things in black and white, it creates a little distance and a sort of like objectivity, and I'm like, okay, well, this is insane. Like, this is this is objectively like nuts. And and that was the beginning of really, like, actually being able to tolerate that I have those thoughts, those are the kinds of conversations I'm having with myself. And rather than just like having them and then like putting it to the background, pretending that it's not happening, and then having, problems manifest in my life as if they had nothing to do with me and the way that I was talking to myself. It that was one of the things that kind of broke through it in the first place, and it was a painful process of stop start and not really wanting to do it. And but once you get through a certain, like, I don't know, like eye of a needle, then there was a lot more flow available. Because when I was at that point, for like a good chunk of my 20s, like, deep depression, suicide, all the, like, the whole thing, I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't prioritizing my art. I didn't even identify as an artist at that point, even though I always had since I was like two, you
Yeah.
know. And I had no access to that because this is all that was going on. And I've talked about this before. One of the things, of no, the thing that pulled me out of one of my, darkest experiences of depression was, kind of having this conversation with myself again in a journal about, are we gonna kill ourselves or not? And and then at some point, just like we've had this conversation so many times. You're clearly not going to, so can we just stop having the fucking conversation? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I think the prompt that pulled me out, and
yeah.
it's not one that I've included in my book, but it
Mm,
was, what would you want somebody to say at your funeral?
mm. Like,
And I would not want somebody saying at my funeral all the things that I was saying to myself, telling
no.
myself how useless and worthless I was, and what a crap mother I was, and how crap I was at my
Yeah,
job, and how, I'd
yeah,
written poetry for years and never done anything with it. And it was
yeah.
just, and how I was a crap daughter, a crap mother, a crap wife, you name it. I told
Mm,
myself I was crap at it. And I thought, then the next prompt that helped me, and these all came to me intuitively as well, was,
mm,
how can I see myself differently? How can I look at myself through the eyes of other people? So I asked one of my eldest daughter, actually, who's always been very blunt and very honest, um, was I really as crap a mother as I thought I was? And she said no. But she
mm.
did qualify that with, but you are the only mother I've ever had. So,
bless bless her. Yeah, a little bit of humor goes a long way in those situations as well. But yeah, and it was really just like, okay, well, and the prompt, the thing that came to me was like, okay, well, since we're not going to do that because you haven't, and we've decided to stop having the conversation because it's boring, and so what are you going to do now that you've decided to stick around? And that was the beginning of not just kind of coming out of the depression and the things that come with that, but really identifying what really am I here for, the big purpose, the big vision. And that directed all the things that I've done since, and the journey that I've been on, and creating the things that I've created. And and so from that point, my journaling has also transformed to, now I'm available to have access to these creative channels. Now I'm available to have creative flow, because it's not that I couldn't create creative flow, it's that I wasn't actually interested in it, despite thinking that I was, because all of this stuff was in the way.
Yes. Can I just answer Karen here? Because
Yeah,
she said, I
please. Yeah,
don't write
yeah,
bad things. I just write things like I'm going to the gym there. That's a list of, that's a kind of, that's your diary. That's not journaling. Um, and you say you don't write about your feelings. There's a resistance there. So I would
yeah,
ask yourself, what is the resistance? Why do I not want to explore my feelings? What are you scared? You're scared of something there. And
for
I was
sure.
incredibly scared of thank you, Karen. I was incredibly scared of my feelings because at one point during my depression, I had so much anger and so much rage inside
Oh
that
yeah,
actually
the
the
rage.
thoughts of just, I mean, sometimes I would literally score through pages with the pen. Like it'd go through 7 or 8 pages of the journal. I would scratch so hard. Um, and that was incredibly hard to deal with, but it's also incredibly cathartic when you can get that out. Our emotions
Mm,
are here for a reason. And we
mm,
spend so many years tramping them down and saying, no, we can't, anger is bad, this is bad, that. No emotion is bad. They're messengers. There's something wrong. And once we can let that emotion out, and when you bottled it up for years, it's quite hard to actually let it out. And I think that's one of the reasons people give up journaling or they stop and start because those emotions start to come out and they, no,
exactly.
I'm not going there. So sometimes it
Yeah,
helps to have support, either a book of prompts or to somebody that you can talk to, to help you with it. Just somebody that you can even just drop into their message and say, hey, I'm, having difficulty processing this emotion. Can we have a chat or whatever? I think that can be really useful. Having a creative outlet is also really useful because if you're a painter, and you're feeling this rage, you can just get out your black paint, and for me, it's words that, I had some poetry that was, I will never ever publish. It was littered with swear words that I would never even use in my normal day to day life. Um, but that's what that got it out. It got it, and movement is key as well. We've got to move through these things. You live in a body, and your body has got to move. And
yeah,
again, that some of that creativity, like dancing, again, like your art, can be full expressive movement.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I really, emotions are the core of the human experience. Like obviously we do other things other than feel things, but actually we do little else but feel things. And we we have and I think, I mean, it's a thing in the West, it is also a thing in our generation. And all of the things that have happened in human history that have essentially separated things that were once together as a whole, like spirituality became
Mm.
separate from the sciences, which became separate from the arts. But if you look back further enough, beyond the Renaissance, beyond the start of organized religion,
Yeah.
basically, we those things were always together. And the separation of those things has a separate, become kind of disconnected with all the different energies that are all in movement and in motion in our existence, in our body, in our energy field. And we become, we're fairly familiar with physical energy because we get tired and we go to bed at night, just
Yeah.
about. And we're all familiar with mental energy because most of us in today's society are knowledge workers. Like, we work with knowledge, we work with ideas and information, and we have some idea of our emotional energy because we get angry sometimes and we scare ourselves. It's been my experience, at the
Yeah.
beginning of my journey. But actually, beyond that, you have sensory energy, you have spiritual energy, you have creative energy, you have social energy. And so much of the time, we're unaware of all these other facets of our life, and we're overly reliant, particularly on mental energy, to a point where sometimes I would speak to someone, maybe somebody I'm coaching, or like a friend or whatever, and I'm like, well, how do you feel? And they would start their next sentence with, I think. And I'm like, and
Yeah.
then they would be like, oh, I think I'm, I think I'm putting too much time and energy into my work and it's frustrating me. And also, my boss is a dick. And I'm like, I understand what you've said and I can empathize with you because, we're in the same room. But actually, you've given me a string of thoughts. Like, but what you're really saying is, I feel frustrated, I feel powerless,
Mm.
and and I actually feel quite sad and a bit angry.
Yeah, and
Like,
I think, yeah, that's because we've learned to be in our heads and to try and
mm,
rationalize everything. And the thing is, journaling is not rational.
oh, nothing about it is
Yeah,
natural. Yeah.
and it can be very raw and it can be very real when you're doing it, when you let yourself open up.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I love to use meditation as well. When I do workshops, I go into
Mm,
people's memberships, and I've done workshops and things around body confidence and other areas. But I always start off with the meditation, because when you get yourself into that meditative state, you're open to allowing those emotions to come up.
mm,
You let go of the rational part, the thinking part, the brain, and you just
yeah.
feel, and
Yeah.
you're aware of your body, you're aware of the emotions. And once you can get the brain out of the way, because even with our journaling, we can sit there and we can write something, and then you can try and rationalize it, or you
Yeah.
can try and wonder why, and you can go off on tangents and never achieve the purpose that you came to your journal for.
Yeah.
Um, so I think meditation sometimes is really useful in that, in getting to the core. And that's why people advocate morning pages as well, because when you first
Mm,
wake up in the morning,
mm.
your head's clear, there's nothing going on. And so I've never got on with that. I'm not a morning person. And when I
I
get up,
tried it.
I need to go to the bathroom straight away. So there's no.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I gave it a good go, morning pages, for like, like literally like 6 months, and then I decided the other forms of journaling, which much more beneficial for me, and just acknowledging what Rebecca said. Claiming one's feelings is vulnerable for sure. Thinking is sort of hedging one's bet to see if the other is a safe person. Yeah, exactly. And and it creates a fragmentation, because that's what we think, or what we think we should think, and then that's what's
Yeah.
actually going on. And so a lot of the time, we're just confused, and we've overridden what's actually happening to us. We're overridden and negated our own truth. And so we're walking around in the world in a kind of like fragmented state. And the word integrity is like bandied around all the time. And on the surface level, integrity basically means you're going to do what you say you're going to do. But a much deeper level, if you look at the etymology of the word, which is one of my favorite hobbies, is to look these things up, is it's integral. And to be integral is to be whole. Like,
Yeah.
like, I think in Italian, a piece of like brown rice is called integrale, because it's integral, it's whole. You put it in the ground, something grows. It's a whole food. And so when we're talking about integrity, we're talking about being whole in ourselves, which means everything, feelings, thoughts, sensation, all of that is integrated and accounted for. And that's impossible to do when you're making your feelings wrong, because you shouldn't, that's not what you're supposed to be feeling, as if as if
Well, there's that word again, supposed to be. And the
yeah,
should, the coulds and the shoulds and the,
yeah,
I should be. And I think a lot of us, we wear masks as well. And that's what I discovered through my journaling as well, that I was wearing a lot of masks. I was wearing the
yeah,
mother mask, I was wearing the daughter mask, I was wearing the teacher mask. Um, I was wearing a different mask when I went to yoga. I
yeah,
was wearing. And so it was like, who's behind these masks? Who's the real Neve? And yes, I do
yeah.
understand that we do have to present differently in different places. That's just kind of become kind of a norm, isn't it? You can't be, you go to a networking event and
No,
you're
but
not.
there's a way of like
Yeah,
having that particular representation be an actual representation.
presentation. Yes, but you're still
You
being
know?
you. It's
Yeah,
not. Um,
yeah, yeah.
whereas I felt like in my marriage, I couldn't be me because he wanted
Mm,
me to be somebody completely different. And no matter
yeah,
how I tried, I couldn't be the person he wanted me to be. And
yeah.
that's a lot of what led to the depression. And it was through my journaling that I discovered, because when I first started my journaling, one of the things that really threw me was the question, what are your talents, your
Mm,
skills? What are your strengths
mm,
or weaknesses? And I could give you like probably 28 4 pages of my weaknesses at that point. Yeah.
mm,
Strengths, oh, blank page after blank page after blank page, because that's how deep into self-hatred I was. But it's only when you start to actually look at the little things that you do every day, like the fact that I got up and I got through the day. I'm resilient.
mm,
The fact that I kept going, even though it like really was for my children, I kept going. But I was
mm,
determined that this was not going to beat me. Therefore, that's another strength. I'm determined.
mm.
It's finding that. And that's what journaling does for you, because you find those little nuggets of gold in
Yeah,
amongst all that other writing.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like Rebecca's just asked a really great question, which I'd like to address. So what's the difference or overlap between masking and taking a role? And this is a great question because in some ways it's hair splitting, but I think the distinction is actually really important. We have roles in our lives, like, when you're a teacher, you're fulfilling a particular job, you're fulfilling a role. When you're a mother, you have a job there as well. When you're a coach, you have a job there. When you're a partner, you have a job there. When you're a daughter, you have a job there. These are all social roles that are normal and healthy to have. What I think becomes I think what's at the root of the problem that creates the confusion and makes the whole thing problematic is when we become identified with those roles and we don't see them as roles anymore. And I think this is a common thing that I find with a lot of women that I work with that are coming out of like a period of motherhood where the children are like, they're like going into their like teens, so they're kind of starting to have their own lives. And for the last 13, 14 years, you've just been mum. Your name become mum. Your husband starts calling you mum. Which in and of itself is fine, but it's like you then that becomes your entire identity. And so when the world shifts, you're completely lost because you haven't maintained that kind of integrity and your own wholeness of self outside of, or in fact overarching, being a mum. Who's the person whose energy is imbuing the mumness. And it's the same with all the other roles. And so when that identification happens, I think that's when it becomes problematic, because then you become like one or two or three dimensional when actually you're multifaceted, and you forget the other aspects of who you are, which is essentially your spirit. And I think that happens to, when you can become identified with your business, which is why, I particularly in this beta program that I'm going to be running next week, one of the things I'm going to be talking about is creating this distance between who you are and your brand, because your brand, your business, is one expression, and it's a very big, very important, very valuable asset that expresses who you are, but it's not actually who you are. Being a teacher isn't actually who you are, it expresses some of who you are. And so when you create that distance, then you actually come from a more powerful place, and your teacherness is more powerful because it's got you in it, you know. And then you can come back to yourself, to your own integrity, and be clear about who you are. Masking is kind of something else altogether. That's just like, well, the world looks like this, I'm like this, that doesn't work, so let me change this so that it works over there. And you can get away with it for a while, and actually it's a skill, and it's a good skill to have if you recognize it as a skill, and again, not forget that you're doing something and you're not actually being who you are.
Yeah, and the mask can become a kind of a permanent thing. Like, so it's a form of kind of hiding who you are. And again, I
Yeah,
think a lot of that I mean, I know a lot of my I have a lot of people in my life who are, ADHD and autistic, and they talk about masking. But for me, the masking came in hiding who I was, basically. I was
yeah,
hiding my authentic self because I didn't believe I was worth anything.
yeah,
So a lot of the time, that masking comes back to our own self worth. It's thinking that we're
absolutely.
not good enough for
Yeah,
whatever role it is we're trying to fill, um,
yeah,
or whatever shoes, or if you're in a relationship where somebody else expects things of you.
mm,
And that's the one thing I always tell my clients as well, is that we should not have expectations of people or even
yeah,
of ourselves. We have
yeah,
invitations. We can
yeah,
invite somebody, or we can invite ourselves to explore something. But to have an
mm,
expectation that we're going to achieve something just sometimes, well, quite often, can set us up for failure.
yeah, for sure. And it's also like, you know the disappointment and expectation comes together. So if you don't like, that there's no disappointment without expectation. And there are,
Exactly.
and there are certain expectations that are like, you can't get away from them. Like if you're someone's mom, you're expected to live with your children. Like that's one of the expectations that there are. And
Yeah.
you can argue that it's a fair expectation, but it's a fair
Yeah.
expectation according to a set of to according to a particular paradigm. Because actually, loads of, like, in a different decade, loads of parents sent their children to boarding school, and that was
Yeah.
acceptable. So expectations are always context relevant, and it's not
I
like,
think we can still see it as an invitation, though, rather than a total. I mean, I know
yeah,
there's a societal expectation, but if you can turn that around to on yourself and say,
yeah,
you've invited, like I have children, I invited children into my life.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah, yeah.
um,
One way or
yeah,
another,
yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely totally agree with that. And it's just and so, but it is difficult to question our expectations when they're enculturated,
Yes.
because we're not only questioning ourselves and our own expectations, but we're actually questioning like a consensus.
But it's still, that's something you can do in your journal as well. You can ask
Oh,
yourself
definitely,
why you're
definitely.
doing something.
Yeah.
Is it because you actually really, really want to do this, or because
Mm.
somebody has an expectation of you?
Yes, yeah,
And if somebody
definitely.
has an expectation of you, does
Mm.
that mean you actually have to do it? There's nothing wrong with disappointing people.
Yeah, that's right.
There's
Totally. Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
nothing wrong with disappointing other people.
And I think
It's
that's,
you you've got to
earlier.
worry about.
That's right. And actually, there's nothing wrong with disappointing yourself either. Like sometimes,
It's harder.
it's harder, but there's nothing wrong with it, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, okay, like I have certain expectations of myself, and I can call them invitations, but there's a kind of truth that, there's a certain standard that I want to maintain. There's a certain excellence that I want to deliver. That's like a want that comes from my own integrity. And when I don't meet those standards, or when I don't meet those expectations, like there is going to be an experience of disappointment. And that gets to be okay, because actually the disappointment, just like any other emotion, indicates to me what I value. And so, and then I can take action following that, whether that's to adjust my expectations and to adjust my goals. And people who work closely with me, they know about my delusional goals and my delusional ambitions. So a lot of the time, yeah, I just have to adjust those. But a lot of the time, it's like, it's for me, disappointment is a good prompt to question, was I impeccable? Did I do what I said I was going to do? Was I thoughtful? Did I pull out all the stops? Or was I a bit lazy? Or was I a bit sloppy? Or did I not take care of myself well enough? And really asking those questions in a neutral way, I think is a good actually starting point around the journal. And then when
Yeah,
you notice that, like, the journaling becomes berating, then you know that you've taken the disappointment and made it mean something about how awful you are, when actually disappointment is neutral. It's
yeah.
just an emotion that's telling you
Uh, and,
something.
th- and that's where we come to looking at self-compassion and kindness towards yourself. And I often say
Yeah.
to people, would you say that to a friend?
Yeah.
And the answer
Yeah.
is, 99.9% of the time, no, I would not say that to a friend
Yeah.
who'd come to me with this. And so, well, why are you saying it to yourself?
Yeah.
Let's be a little bit kind here to ourselves.
Yeah.
Let's have some compassion for ourselves. Yes, we did not reach that goal, but what I always do as well is when I failed, or not reached a goal or a target or an expectation, is actually sat down and looked at it and said again, was that really realistic in the time
Yeah.
frame I had? Looking at all the other things I
99% of the
had
time
going
it
on,
wasn't.
yeah. Looking at all the other things I had going on in my life, was that a realistic expectation? And I can guarantee you that about 95% of the time that answer is no. I was putting
Yeah.
myself under undue pressure.
Yeah.
And I would
Yes.
not do that to anybody else in my life. So
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
again am I doing it to me?
Yeah. Yesterday I had Becky Anna Marie, who you may or may not know from our BBS community.
Yeah.
She came and did a guest expert talk in my membership, and she was talking about, checking yourself, like, it's to do with self-care and productivity for neurodivergence. And she talked about, checking your task, like, is it a task or is it an actual full-on project that you've mistaken
Yep. Been
into
there.
a task. And it's just like, yeah, like, that's like a
Yeah.
really common one that shows up. And it's like, in one respect, that happens because, it is a skill to be able to look at an outcome and break down the steps to get there. And a lot of the time, in my case, it's a way of, it's like a sneaky way that, my pattern wants to find an excuse to tell me that there's something wrong with me. And
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah.
I set myself up with ridiculous goals and ridiculous things, just so that at the end of it I can be like, see, you're shit, or like whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes, like build a website is not something that should go on your to do. Build a website. It should not be the headline on your to do list. That's
yeah, like, that's like
the
a
end
project
goal. Like, yeah,
that
that's an entire project that's broken down into I don't know how many million little bits. But I used to do that too. I would put that
yeah,
on my to do list, and then yeah,
and then
still haven't
wonder
done it.
why, like,
Yeah, wonder why you haven't done it. Because when I introduced the kind of the self-compassion, self-kindness. So what I started doing at the end of my journaling, and I will be honest with you, I don't journal every day.
mm,
I journal as and when I feel I need to. Something will come up when I'm with my own coach, and she will fire something at me. I think, oh crap! So I'll go and take my journal out. Um, but what I started doing was writing down 5 things I can be grateful to. I did it for a month. 5 things every day. 5 things I can be grateful to myself for.
mm,
That was a life changer, a game changer. And that was really, really difficult the first 3 or 4 days. I just sat there and I just thought, what am I going to be grateful to myself for? Then I started writing things like, "Oh, I'm grateful to myself for brushing my teeth twice a day." Oh, yeah, that's kind of like there, you know.
No, well,
But
no, that's a
actually, it's
honestly,
self.
that's a real goal for me. That's like
Yeah,
remembering to
but
do that.
yeah, but that's self care, you know.
Yeah,
I'm, grateful to myself that I fed myself a proper dinner tonight, rather than just grabbing breakfast again for dinner, which for years I did. I'd be
yeah,
so busy, I couldn't be bothered, and I didn't. So just, I mean, it just started off with little things like that, and then it started to get bigger, and I started to see actually, things like, I'm grateful to myself for being my true authentic self in a conversation today, which was
mm,
scary because this was somebody I didn't really want to interact with, things like that. So it built up, and when I looked back, I was able to say, "Wow,
mm.
look at all the things that you've done." So that's a practice I would really recommend for everybody to do. Even
Yeah.
if you do it for a fortnight, if you do it for 30 days, is what I did it for. 5 things every day that you're grateful to yourself for. Um, it can be a bit of a
Gratitude.
game changer if you struggle with self worth and self esteem.
Yeah, gratitude lists is a really incredible tool that I use. That's part of my journaling routine in the morning. And so I think we've moved on into like kind of like different ways of journaling and different ways that you can use it, not just for like accessing creative flow, but really for me, the number one goal is for you to see yourself in your wholeness, to see yourself
Yeah,
fully, honestly, with care and compassion and with grace, but honestly as well, and all of those things together. Because we have, I mean, I talk to hundreds of people a week at at the moment, because I'm building a business and that's a lot of goes on with it. And the number one thing that's like a thread with particularly artists and creatives that I talk to is like, oh, I want to be seen for my art. I want to be loved for my art. And that is of not just like, that's not a vanity thing. That's a human need to be seen and to be gotten and to be
but your
understood and
art
to
is
be
an
felt.
expression of you.
And you are an expression of you, but we are craving that, we want to be received in some way. And and that's great to have that. That's a desire that we have because it's actually a need. And to be responsible for that outcome manifesting, we have to be willing to see ourselves, because
Absolutely.
we can't be seen if what we're putting out is not actually who we are. And so for me, journaling, its real power is in that, in giving us the ability to see ourselves, not just like our behaviors, not just not just what's wrong, not just how can we fix this, not just how to be more productive, not just how, all of that stuff are important, but it's like, who am I really underneath everything? Like, what's my heart desire? Like, what do I like? Why am I here? Like, what makes me feel like fulfilled and good internally? What gives me joy when I'm in conversation? Like, what am I grateful for? Like, what are the things that I value? And all of these questions that are really like, I want to encourage them to be asked in a context of curiosity, because journaling isn't something that's going to fix anything, because there's nothing to fix. Like, you're fine.
Yeah.
This is just about you getting to know who you are. And you know and one of the things that I have several strategies that I recommend and that I use in various times. Right now, journaling every morning is like essential for me, because I have so much going on. I'm building a business. I have an exhibition coming up. Like, I'm holding big spaces, and I'm intentional in how I step into a position of leadership in the spaces that I
Mm.
hold, in the spaces that I hold for my clients. And so for me, having this practice is an anchor. And it allows me to see myself every day, giving me the ability to see others more wholly and more fully. But there are times where it's less of an everyday thing. It's more of a, something's come up and they want to journal about it, a bit like what you're talking about. And so, as
Yeah.
well as gratitudes, I think one of a really useful way to journal is to track like your reactivities. So like if somebody said something and you're triggered, it's like, okay, that pissed me off, or that made me really sad, or whatever. Like that's a great thing to journal about, because that contains so much information about who you are, what's, what's going on underneath, what you really value, etc. And it also gives you, again, like an anchor for like an awareness, because then you're looking out, like, rather than being triggered and then like swiping it under the carpet because it's an uncomfortable emotion, you get to really look at it and track that, throughout the day, throughout the week, etc. I don't know how that is for you and how you use that.
Um, how do I mean, as I said again, I tend to go into kind of meditation.
Mm,
I will ask myself, I will give myself the prompt before I go into meditation, and then I will see what comes up. I will see
mm,
whereabouts in my body I feel that emotion.
mm,
And then I will listen to whatever comes up. Quite often it comes from a previous experience.
mm.
That trigger has come from something way back in the past that actually is not relevant anymore, but your body's held on to it.
Yeah,
And we don't realize that. And so we get triggered. And as you said, we either squash the emotion down or we let loose,
yeah,
neither of which
yeah,
can sometimes be good.
yeah.
Um, so it's about, but a lot of the time, a lot of people want to go back into the whole inner child thing and go back, into the past. And I think a
Mm,
lot of that distracts us from what's
mm.
actually
Yeah, you really
going on.
don't
And
have to. Yeah.
no, we need to
You
look at who
could,
we are
but you
right
don't have
now.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So why did this trigger me? What can I do about it now? How can I resolve this trigger?
Mm,
Um, how can I allow myself to feel this without it triggering anybody else, or without it becoming
mhm.
explosive or becoming
Oh, without hurting other people.
toxic?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So how is it safe for me to let this emotion pass through?
Mm,
Um, and they're the sort of things I look at. So rather than kind of trying to delve back into I mean, sometimes the where it came from will come up for me, but rather
mm,
than trying to delve back into all the past experiences, it's actually, how do I deal with this right now?
yeah.
How do I go through this? And how can I come out of this a better person?
Yeah.
How can this change me so that I can be kinder to myself, nicer to myself, and therefore nicer and kinder to others?
Yeah. For sure. Like, yeah, and again, like asking these questions out of curiosity, because
Yes, and that there always has to be, I think, somewhat of a playful element to your
yeah,
journaling as well.
yeah, yeah,
We've forgotten how to play,
yeah,
you know.
definitely. Yeah.
Um, the one thing, I went to see the Taylor Swift Eras concert in a huge big cinema with
Oh
a load
my
of
God.
people.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't a fan of Taylor Swift. I got invited by a friend, she was paying for my ticket. I said, cool, great, I'll come along. Anyway,
Yeah.
I loved it. I mean, I've never seen anything like. I'm into pure rock, so mostly it's just men and guitars standing on stage. I'd never seen anything like all the costume changes and everything that she did. And at one point, she skips across the stage, and I just thought, that confidence, that pure joy, that just like she just skipped across the stage. And I thought to myself, I wonder if I can still skip, because it was so long since I'd actually skipped. So I actually came home and I skipped around my dining room table and said, yes, I can skip. Right, I'm going to skip around 4 times around the dining room table every day from now on. And I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's right. Like playfulness and curiosity is, that's really the antidote to self-judgment, I would say. If you can approach it with
Yeah.
playfulness and if you can approach it with
Yeah.
curiosity, it's going to be very difficult to tear yourself apart. You know?
Yeah. Because a lot of the time we can look back at what we've written and we can be
Yeah.
critical
Yeah.
and we can judge what we've written. So we need to let
Yeah.
go of the judgment. We need to let go of the criticism and realize that this is who we are and what we're expressing at this moment in time. And tomorrow, if you ask me the same question, you'd probably get a completely different answer
Yeah.
because
It's
things would
what
have
it is.
moved on, things would have
And the
changed.
I really like what you said about, sitting with the emotions in, in meditation. And meditation is one of the tools that I use in a lot of my spaces as well. Um, like in my membership, we have co-working sessions where people can just show up and focus, create, carve out a dedicated time for their creative practice. And that starts with a meditation, and really grounding yourself, connecting with both spirit but and connecting yourself to the grounds, and being able to be in your body and actually feel what you're feeling, to be able to channel that into whatever you're creating. And I like what you said about, just sitting with the feelings that are there and feeling where it is in your body. And you ask some really great questions after that. But for me, actually, if you did just that, if you just allowed yourself to actually let the experience be and let the experience happen, it will pass through. And sometimes you don't even need to journal it because it's gone.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
you
And we
know?
don't do that, do we? We tend not, a lot of the time, we tend to just not sit with our feelings. We don't like feeling, actually. The thing is,
Yeah.
my coach always says is, we never question it when we're happy. When we're feeling happy or excited or everything, we never say, oh, why am I feeling excited? Who can I blame for me feeling happy today? But when we feel any other emotion, we have to
It's a
point a
problem.
finger. It's a problem. We have to, but they're not. They're all just there, and we need to learn to just feel them and to allow them to pass in a moment. The trouble is, we get caught up in our thinking
Yeah.
around that
Yeah.
problem,
Yeah.
around that feeling,
Yeah.
and that's what the journaling really does. When you get
Yeah.
caught up in the thinking, it highlights that thinking and the thoughts you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and we come back to that repetitiveness that we spoke about at the beginning. And I think no matter how long you've been journaling for, you're still going to repeat yourself.
Of course. And you
Yeah,
and you let
yeah,
it. You give yourself
yeah,
grace. It's like, oh look, I'm human. That's a surprise.
yeah.
This is what humans do.
But
And
those repetitions show the patterns. They're the
they
bits we
do.
need to change, the things we need to work on.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, really approaching that with a lot of grace and, or like you said, self-compassion. The other thing that, I find really useful when it comes to journaling, particularly around emotions, because, people who have joined us today have talked about the difficulty in actually just being with those emotions. It's really cultivating almost like a new perception of emotions where they're neutral. you know they're
Mm.
not, they don't mean the things that we make them mean. It's like, I'm angry, therefore I am bad, or I'm angry, therefore I'm destructive, I'm angry, therefore I'm dangerous. It's just like, no, I'm just angry. And one of the things, I'm currently in training to be a shiatsu practitioner, and we've been studying the five elements, which I've done in other contexts. And it's really interesting because each of the five elements correspond to an emotion.
Mm.
And and anger, which is like the wood energy, is actually very closely linked to creativity. But the Chinese, like, it's been translated from Chinese into anger. And in Western, like, society, it kind of makes sense. But actually, a more accurate translation of the Chinese word for that emotion is an irrepressible, spontaneous outburst of energy, which anger fits that criteria. But it could be other things other than anger.
Mm.
And actually, it's like a motion. It's like an emotion. It's like in motion. It just wants to
Yeah.
pass through, and it's like that outburst. It could be mania or whatever it happens to be. But if you take it neutrally, it will pass. And anger is energy that wants to be released. Like, grief is acknowledging a loss, and it's a moment of transformation. Like, sadness is depth, and like joy is expansiveness. Like like none of that are like bad or good
No.
even.
Or other people call them negative emotions. They're just emotions. They're
They're
just
just
there.
emotions.
But they can be messengers. I mean, anger
Yeah.
can tell you that there's something that you need to, you know, without anger, we wouldn't have all the changes in the world that we have, would we?
No, no, no. And
So anger is something that brings about justice
it's a
and, you know,
catalyst. It's a
yeah,
catalyst.
it is a catalyst. But
Yeah,
we don't, because we squash it down, then
yeah,
turn anger is the main one. I think that anger and resentment, they turn into depression. And that
yeah,
becomes anxiety as well, because then we're too
yeah,
anxious. Anxiety, I feel, comes a lot from, I feel both anxiety, they both stem from not knowing who you are and
yeah,
not being who you are.
yeah.
And
Fundamentally, for sure.
mentally.
And
And because if we lose who we are, or think
mm.
we lose who we are, I don't think we ever really truly lose who we are.
No, we
We
kind of just
think
like forget.
we think we've
Yeah,
lost it,
yeah,
and we tell ourselves we've lost sense of who we are.
yeah, yeah,
But deep down, we know.
yeah,
We always
yeah,
know.
yeah.
But it's
It's
that
like,
self-critical voice and the thoughts that tell
yeah,
us we don't.
yeah. I often use the analogy of it's more like it's not something that like you lose. It's more something that like you're almost like misplaced. It's like, if it were like a piece of jewelry, it's like you didn't lose it at a festival. You put it like in a cupboard somewhere and you've forgotten. And so we're in the process of remembering. And and again, with the etymology, depression is the opposite of expression.
Yeah.
And so when anger isn't expressed, it turns in on itself and it kind of like becomes destructive. And then that's where you get the depression. It's like a literal dip in your energy, because when something is so dense and unexpressed and unreleased, it literally creates a black hole. And so, but when you're able to express that and release that, then that's the beginnings of loosening the grip of that depression.
And journaling can really help with that as well. And that's, yeah.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
the one thing I want to say, is that I have had, the question I get asked a lot is, I don't want other people reading my journal. And yes, no, you don't. Your journal is yours. It's private. It's not
Mm,
for anybody else. And it should be the space where you feel free to write absolutely anything you want in
mm,
that journal without censor. you
mm.
know and I know a lot of people with journaling say that you shouldn't correct your spellings and you shouldn't correct your grammar. I'm a bit too much of a pedant not to do that. So I
You're a teacher, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I do when I'm journaling. I did go for a while. I went through a phase of using an online journal and
I don't enjoy it as much.
typing.
I
Yeah, but
don't
I
get the
found
same.
there's something with holding a pen and writing that just
Yeah.
makes everything just flow. I call it the dance
Yeah.
between the hand and the pen. There's just something
Yeah.
that just makes it so much more, I don't know, free
Because
flowing and easier.
because there's a
Your
tactile,
brain
I'm
doesn't get
sure.
quite so involved.
Yeah, I'm sure some neurosciency person can explain this, but I think there's something about, also experiencing the tactile
Yeah,
flow of like the pen on paper, and being able to like literally see your words being created, and also that little bit of extra time that it takes to do that creates more of a distance between your thoughts and what's actually
yeah,
happening. Whereas I find that when I'm typing, like the typing is just too directly reflecting what I'm thinking. And so there's not enough space for me to actually go, wait, is that really what I mean? What does that mean? Oh, isn't that an interesting thought? And do you know what I mean? Like there's just
yes,
not enough
yes, no,
time.
yeah. Whereas you don't really want to be analyzing it as you're writing it.
Mm.
You need to, well, I mean, you don't really want to be analyzing it at all.
No, but
But
I meant just like
yeah,
a tiny space of like reflection,
yes, yeah,
like enough of a feedback that I'm in relationship, like I'm talking to my journal. Whereas when I'm
yeah,
typing, it's kind of just like I'm just like photocopying what's already going on in my head at like
yeah,
super fast speed.
yeah.
So none of it gets processed.
Yeah. And I also find, I mean, I know a lot of people don't like writing, and a lot of people, don't have the the physical ability to write, you know, spiels
Mm,
every day. I actually sometimes find that using the voice memos on my phone
I
and
do
just
that
talking to
too.
that can work really
Yeah,
well. And again,
yeah,
you don't even have to listen back to it, especially if it's something that you just want to get off your chest right now, and you're
yeah,
not sure that that's a really useful tool as well. But
yeah,
I mean, I do love to work with prompts because I just find that prompts just get me to.
yeah. I do like working with prompts as well. So, yeah, I think if we were to summarize all of the things that we've talked about, particularly the practical applications of journaling, I would say that we talked about like having it as a regular practice, but also using it as a tool, as in when you need it, using prompts. And I think you're going to talk about your book as well, where you've collected a lot of incredible prompts to help people process some of these things, including meditation while or before as you're journaling, to really sit with yourself and tune in. What do I actually need right now? What needs to be expressed? What needs to be said? And creating that relationship between the mind and the body and the writing itself, and tracking the moments where you find yourself getting triggered and processing that through your writing and tuning in with the emotions as they come up in your body. Is that like a pretty good nutshell summary of what we
I would
said?
also I would also add to that, whatever you do, treat
Yeah,
yourself with the utmost of kindness and compassion.
absolutely.
There is no judgment on anything you put in your journal.
Yeah, sometimes actually, like I was looking through my journals earlier this morning because I knew that we were gonna do this, and and there was the one page where it was just like "fuck off." That's it. I don't like, it was just like big massive letters, and I'm like, I don't even know what that was about, but clearly I
Well,
needed to
that's a fair
express.
enough expression of the day. Then that's kind of tells you enough about how you were feeling.
It's just like, oh, oh well, that was that day.
Yeah. But sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you just
Yeah,
need to get that out,
yeah,
and get that down. Um, and when it's out, that's the thing, with all these emotions, we need to get it out. And journaling is a really good tool for getting it out there.
yeah. Nice. So that's about what we have to say about journaling. And just before we go, do you want to tell us a little bit about your book and the journal prompts that you have, and anything else that you've got going on, and how people can best contact you?
But the best way to contact me is probably through Facebook. Um, you can do it through Facebook Messenger or just on my profile. Um, I've got a book out at the moment called 52 Weeks to a Happier You, and it's based on the journal prompts that I was getting on a daily basis that helped me through my depression and anxiety. I've very carefully curated the 52 because I did thought if I put 365 in there, it's kind of a bit onerous and stuff. So I looked at the ones that helped me the most, and I put those 52 in. So that book's available on Amazon. I'll put links in after on the Facebook and YouTube after this for you. And it's available on Amazon UK and America and several other places, not Ireland, unfortunately, because of all the Brexit nonsense. They can't
Oh
print books
yeah,
in
yeah,
Ireland.
yeah.
So if you're in Ireland and you want a copy, you will need to message me and I'm happy to send you one. Um, but it's yeah, so there's that book. And the other thing I'm doing at the moment is because I'm building my coaching practice, I'm offering 4 sessions of coaching for £100. So that's generally around confidence, around visibility, actually anything that you need, any area in your life that you need to work on to find your voice, to be able to say yes or no to the things that you want to um, say yes or no to. So again, that I don't do sales pages and all that. So again, you'll just have to message me and I'll send you details. Um, well, that's what I'm up to at the moment.
Nice. It's the best way. And likewise for me, the best way to find me is on Facebook. And I have a 30-day journaling prompt um thing that happens by email, and it's a 30-day journaling guide for clearing creative block. So it incorporates a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. And much like you, Nave, I kind of curated some of the best prompts that I found helped me not just, because for me, getting over my depression, or getting through my depression is synonymous with me clearing my creative block. And so
Yeah.
I I used my own experience to really create like, it's a journey that starts relatively, comfortably, because you want to be able to get into something, and we go pretty deep, and we really explore things at those kind of like uncomfortable emotions level, and coming out of the other side with not just, oh, we're gonna clear the creative block and we now have a journaling practice, but really coming out with some clarity on, if I am to invite creative flow in my life, what's that really gonna be for? And having that sense of who you are become a little bit clearer, and something that you can anchor yourself to as you move on with whatever it is that you're creating and what you're doing. So that's available for free. Um, I'm going to put the link to sign up to that somewhere in the comments, or I may well forget, so you can message me and ask for it if I don't do it promptly enough. That's just the truth. And right now, I'm also launching a beta program where I'm working with artists and creatives who are ready to start putting their work out in the world and being seen and being loved for their arts, and and therefore want to create a powerful personal brand that represents that you truly are, and does justice to your art. It's an 8-week program. We're not going to be like fiddling about with canva and colors and logos and stuff. That's like maybe like 5% of that, but we're really going to be talking about identity and stepping into a space where you're ready to lead, and you're ready to um, have your art make the biggest impact that it can. Um, if that sounds kind of appealing but also kind of squirmish, have a conversation with me and we can have a chat and see if it's for you. And it isn't for everybody. A lot of people aren't there yet, and it might be that you're just in a space where you just want to rebuild or build more of a relationship with your creative practice, in which case talk to me about my membership. So one way or another, the best thing to do is to get in touch with me and just say, hey, how can we work together? Or please, can I have your journal prompts? So that's the best way to do things.
We're both on Facebook, aren't we? So it's
We're
kind of
both on Facebook. So yeah, so just Raphy Mendoza, and
I'm
I'm
Neve
gonna
Corcoran. I don't have my full name there, do I?
but
That was, but it's
well,
streaming on Facebook and
we're
YouTube anyway.
streaming on
So
Facebook, and I'll tag you in my one, just in case people can't find you. And
I
yeah,
mean, my book is not just for people with anxiety, for depression. It's for anybody who just wants to explore themselves on a deeper level and become
I
happier.
would say the same. It is designed for people who want to clear their creative block. But your creative block might be happening in your home life. Your block might be happening in your professional life that you don't see as being creative. But we all have creative energy. It's one of the energy centers. It's your sacral chakra if you're into yoga.
Yep.
So if you're out there telling yourself that you're not creative, then message me, because I recorded a live with Becky where we spent 2 hours telling you that you are, because you're human. So if you're telling yourself that lie, come to me, but be prepared.
Yeah. I mean, I spent many years telling myself that lie because my
Yeah,
mother told it to me.
yeah.
um,
So
but we're all. I mean, even our thoughts are creative. I mean, when you think about the scenarios you create for yourself, um,
yeah,
we're creative beings.
yeah. It's a question of intentionality. You're either intentionally creating something, or you're unintentionally creating a mess in
Yeah.
in your life.
We
So
want to be intentional.
So on that note,
Note.
thank you to everybody who joined us. I
Thank
think a
you.
few of you are still here. I just want to shout out to Karen, Rebecca, and over on Instagram we also had loads of people came to join us. We had Rianne, we had Sophie, we had Alessandra, we had Barbara, we had Rosalind, Denise, Joanna, and some people with interesting names that I can't pronounce or aren't your real names.
But we had
Thank you
Iris
for
on
joining us.
Facebook as well.
So, yes, cool. All right. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
And thank you, Nate, for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been fun.